Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name has been Dogboat333, and welcome back to Hearts Around 4, the New Order Last Days of Europe, as the United States of America. Now, last video, we got kind of acquainted with the situation. The civil rights issue is getting amped up, and a young, bright-eyed astronaut named John Glenn is currently running for the, or prepping to run for the governorship of Ohio. Meanwhile, the civil rights issue is coming to a head, and so this kind of brings us to the branching off point of what happens with the NPP. Because I've said this before, we want John Glenn. We're going to fucking space. So the decision is, so we're gonna have to go with the NPP. The question is, which candidate? And you can't just choose which candidate you want. It depends on what choice you make here. If you go for the Kennedy plan, you'll get a token civil rights bill passed, and that'll really upset the South. And so a bunch of Southern Democrats will go ahead and cede over to the NPP far right. And that'll empower George Wallace to take the nomination in 64, whenever that time comes. When it comes to the movement, cracking down on the movement and vetoing the Civil Rights Act, that's going to piss off the more progressive Republicans in the time. And so a bunch of Republicans will secede over to the center. And so you'll get a center candidate. Which, do I want to say who that is right now? I'll keep that. Yeah, I'll probably accidentally say it. Robert Kennedy. So he'll be the nominee. So the question is, do you want George Wallace or Robert Kennedy? And I have a lot of sympathy for Robert Kennedy. I think he's probably the greatest president, or one of the greatest presidents America never had. So I want to do a good old RFK campaign. So that means we're going to have to veto civil rights, which is kind of an uncomfortable thing that I just have to say. But we're going to have to say no to civil rights for now. The civil rights movement is proving to be a bigger threat to our stability than we could ever imagine. Maybe America needs change, but it will only be when we deem it necessary, not at the whims of the mob. So Nixon, he's not having the civil rights malarkey, apparently. So progressives are not going to like this, but what are you going to do? Secretary of State William Rogers was well familiar with the steps of a South African tango. The South African ambassador would ask in vague generalities about admission into the OFN without any real plans for common defense or tariff liberalizations. The Secretary would in turn respond with vague updates on South Africa's application, now nearly a decade old. It suited both parties. The South Africans wanted the threat of OFN membership to counter the Germans, but the OFN needed to preserve the last democracy in Africa. Neither, however, wanted German intervention, which OFN membership could provoke. Thus, the South African tango continued on without an end. "How can I help you today, Ambassador?" Rogers struck a neutral tone to hide his boredom. It was near certain that response would be entirely predictable. "Well, we're doing very well, and about that OFM application," would be the usual response. "The Germans are making their move," Ambassador Wilhelm Christian Nod declared. "Herzog's Boer nationalists are talking to the Germans. South Africa's in danger, and we need American help." That got Rogers' attention, and as his stomach dropped at this most unexpected turn in the decades-long discourse. "What kind of help are we talking about?" "Financial, intelligence, but above all, military," Nod said firmly. "If the Boers and the Germans want to fight, we won't make it easy for them." Well, no more dancing, no more games. There we are. Where are they campaigning? They're also campaigning in the West Coast. Jesus. We'll expand the reach of our campaign to the West Coast from cities of San Fran, LA, and Seattle to the arid flatlands of the Sequoia woodlands of California, the coastal woodlands of Oregon and Washington, and also Alaska. They don't bring up Alaska for whatever reason. I don't know why. I mean, Alaska's a nice place. I'd bring that up if I were them. But apparently not. Many residents post-war Europe often heard stories about life in the promising U.S. Children listened intently as their grandparents spoke of immigrants going from rags to riches within a few years of their arrival. Seeing how the fatherland neglected to print stories about life in the U.S., citizens under the Jacobite could only rely on their relatives for an accurate portrayal. It was uncommon for foreigners to contemplate whether there truly is poverty in the promised land of America. Michael Harrington's novel, The Other America, debuted in bookstores across the country today. The novel discusses the issue of poverty in the U.S., exposes readers to a significant number of Americans living below the poverty line. Harrington claims that many poor residents live in social isolation and are not commonly seen by the middle and upper classes. He calls for politicians to take immediate and remedial action to rid the country of every aspect of poverty. Critics of the novel disagree with Harrington's socialist tendencies, but most readers agree with the call to action. The book has already gained influence on a number of politicians in the capital who want to create a better country for every citizen, rich or poor. Economists are already devising ways to make education and healthcare more accessible in the country. America's biggest misconception, debunked. So we have no research slot available. We're going to get working on our doctrine. Combined operations is probably the best one for most nations anyway, so we're obviously going to go with that. And organization, reinforcement rate, it's kind of a no-brainer. We're going with that. Polls are updated. So let's check in on the horse race. We're tilting in Oregon, tilt in Alaska, tilt in Illinois, tilt in Vermont, so we might want to head over there to try and flip the state. We'll end up seeing how our campaigns go. So the Rockies, all likely victories all across there. Assassination attempt on Eddie VIII. There we are. The Days of Resistance. We have a solid NPP campaign. Beautiful. Hopefully that'll help us out on the West Coast, and we'll see the opposition crash and burn. Huh? Midland campaign. I'll take that at this point. So I'm thinking New England next. The civil rights issue seems to have no end in sight. Families, friends, and even Congress divide on the best solution. Our great President Nixon, however, has come up with a plan to put down the dissent once and for all. Those goddamn liberals will learn to fall in line. And they will, after Nixon crushes whatever crazy un-American legislation they've come up with by his own hand. Estimations show that by turning his silence into lukewarm, verbal-only support, there'll be just enough support to clear a supportive bill in the Senate. And Vice President Kennedy has just the bill. They're walking right into it, the suckers. They have no idea what's coming, do they? Come on, New England. Alright, so I'm glad this finally has a, this finally has a distinguishment that says what it is. Because before, this did affect the mood, but, not enough. So, the two young men walked down the streets of LA, basking in the midday sun, but the topic of their conversation was distinctly gloomier. So, did you hear about the Nazi spy they caught in New York? They're saying he was trying to get in touch with Yaki, of all people. That's crazy, isn't it? The other replied, I know how much they hate the Japs. Hell, who doesn't around here? But I never thought they'd get in bed with the Krauts. The spy was reaching out to them. Didn't say nothing about agreeing to anything. The two men, like plenty of others out in California, had their own sympathies towards the NPP. After all, everyone in LA or the Bay Area had to live only a few miles away from a humiliating reminder of 1945, and the NPP were the only ones who seemed to have any interest in getting the treaty ports back. He turned to his friend and asked, so what do you think? Was he in on it or nah? Now, I've always been conflicted on what to go here, because I want a strong NPP game, so that we can set up lane, but if the NPP is too strong, it won't look good for, the Republicans come, the RDs come 68. But I think, to me personally, it sounds like a commie loadable. So we'll go with that. Get campaign in New England. And we'll see how dramatic the shift is. Where are they campaigning? Great Lakes, okay. Yeah, I have my fingers crossed that it'll work out. Ooh, right, we have an event, we have a focus we gotta do. We gotta veto the Civil Rights Act, oh god. Allowing the Civil Rights Act to go to the Senate will be the perfect move to stop it once and for all. Defeating the law will humiliate Kennedy, the Democrats, and the progressives, and the strong veto will show the nation our stance on the issue. If the people want change, maybe they should be less damn militant. So, this will kind of give us an introduction to the Senate bill. Of the Senate mechanics. So, we'll be able to pass bills throughout the Senate after, as soon as we get a person elected. So, Nixon and Kennedy have proposed a new civil rights bill to desegregate the South and provide more opportunities for African Americans. The bill is not very popular with many Democrats, especially Southern Democrats, but if passed, will mark the first big step towards full equality for all Americans. So, all 45 Republicans support the bill, 6 of the 40 Democratic senators support the bill. There seems to be no further room for compromise. All 5 of the MPP senators support the bill, and none of the MPP's far-right senators support the bill, and there's seemingly no room for compromise. So, we'll sit back and see what happens. Actually, we already know what's going to happen, because, old Tricky Dick is gonna... He's gonna do an upset. The Oval Office, in a rare moment of peace, lies silent. No aides stand by, no cameras are present, and no interruptions are tolerated. Not on the cusp of such crucial news. President Richard Nixon sits at his desk, anxiously signing a few inconsequential documents. Shooting a few unexpected glances of a telephone to his right, he realizes his pile of unsigned papers has been exhausted. Just as he kicks back in the chair to relax after a long day, the phone rings. He already knows a caller, and for what reason he calls. The National Assembly of Guyana would soon finish voting on their National Security Act, and William Rogers would be the first to know results. Get me straight, Rogers. It was a landslide, Dick. Barely more than a quarter voted down. They're afraid of Burnham. They should be, now more than ever. He'll crack down on anyone who threatens their peace. Political rivals, anti-segregationists, anyone and everyone. Why do we put the bastard in power anyway? The press is just going to have a field day. Nixon slammed the phone back in the cradle, laying back in his seat and rubbing the bridge of his nose. He knows that disaster looms. What have we gotten ourselves into? So yeah, that's my Nixon impression. If you hadn't gathered from the last video. I think it's okay. It's not the best, obviously, but it's sufficient. I got the down, I think. I think I have that down. Although President Nixon's sweeping electoral victory 2 years ago may prove that he once enchanted the American people, it seems that the magic has swept into the polls of in 1960s, wearing off for many of them. And many of those people also happen to be journalists and nationally syndicated newspapers. Headlines riddled with pun-laden insults seem to be everywhere, and titles like Nixon Needs Fixin', Tricky Dick in a Pickle, and Law, parentheses listness, and parentheses disorder fill the newsstands. Their main source of ire is a rising tension of the civil rights movement in the South, specifically the president's inability to properly contain it. The man who once staved off nuclear Armageddon, or so we would claim, now seems powerless to stop a bunch of student protesters and racist hoodlums from squaring off. His image is deteriorating as a result. Nixon, who seems impish and anemic when compared to Vice President Kennedy's charm and charisma, needs all the positive pressure he can get. All he can do for now is hope that they will eventually change their tune, though he cynically insists that the press has a grudge against him that they simply will not let go. They got it out for him. Well, we'll wait and see what happens there, won't we? We're vetoing the Civil Rights Act. Okay, a solid NPP campaign. Polls are updated. And let's see how dramatic this... It's actually not too dramatic. It's tilting, leaning... It's looking a little bit better for us in a couple of these states. Some tilts and leans in the Great Lakes, which is very good. Leaning towards victory in Arizona. A couple toss-ups in the Deep South. A complete toss-up in Vermont right now. And tilts in New Hampshire, Connecticut is still kind of solid right now. Though we'll wait and see, of course. Yeah, alright. Thinking maybe we want to go for the Rockies. Maybe see if we can get Nevada flipped. Do something a little bit different campaigning-wise. The RDs run a respectable campaign in the Great Lakes. Keep a closer eye on them. Shock, horror, delight, and a myriad of other feelings bubbled up in the Senate today as news of a surprise veto of Kennedy's Civil Rights Act trickled in, with Majority Leader Lyndon Johnson garnering enough support to push the bill through the floor and onto Nixon's desk. Most assumed that its passing was a foregone conclusion, but that was not to be, with a big red veto stamped across the copy submitted to President Nixon. While conservatives and Dixiecrats celebrate the defense of American ideals, many progressives, both Democrat and Republican, see this betrayal as the final straw in a long line of inaction and pig-headed appeasement. Senators murmur or whispers of defection and revolt in the backrooms while the party celebrates its unity. The back of VRDs has broken, and wolves across the NPP circle ever closer. And so, the defections begin. So if the NPP is going to shift to the left, we're going to get northern riots, which is going to give us a nasty hit to PP and a nasty hit to stability. And a new era for the Republican Democrats dawns. And so there's going to be some changing support across the states. And already we're getting some support from the NPP boosting up right now. William Rogers sits quietly on a large, ugly couch, intently listening to the daily news. Morning, the recent passing of a National Security Act has allowed the Guineas government to seize hundreds of critics and political agitators, as well as executing dozens more. The Guineas President, Forbes Burnham, has stated that the raid strengthened the Guineas Republic and its democratic system. Exiled former President Chidi Yagan issued a statement. A dozen people crowd the rooms, aides, secretaries, and even a few senators, all sitting in pure silence as the low hum of the television and its tiny speakers recite the unfortunate news. Roger sighs, deciding he has heard enough. Standing up, he shuffles to the TV and turns it off. He turns over and looks to the 2 or dozen so people crowded in the sitting room. Their expectant eyes locked upon him, their eyes awaiting his word. He pauses for a moment. No one speaks to the press. Not yet. Not the press secretary, not me, not any of you. Not a word until we figure out our next step. Understand? A series of nods acknowledge his message. Now, someone get me a phone line to the president. We need to arrange a cabinet meeting. Quickly. Yes, Mr. President, we need to do this now. The NPP's popularity grows a bit, and we get an increase of support in social democracy. So we're doing, I believe, the Rockies next. Have our campaign blaze a trail through the Rocky Mountain states, from the rugged interior of Montana and Idaho to the plateaus of Colorado and the deserts of Nevada and Utah. Let's do it! Change things up a little bit. So we want to select a new national focus. We'll get working on expanding. No, we'll do our commitment to African democracy. Africa's a damned continent, near wholly controlled by despots and fascists, with what little free lands remaining having been returned to the Stone Age. Yet even in the darkest of rooms, there's a beacon of light. And just as we are a light of democracy in the world, we shall defend South Africa and make them the beacon of democracy and light in a dark continent. Well, there we go. So let's take a look at the Senate and see how the defections are. Yeah. Both senators in Washington have defected over. We have a senator in Montana defecting. Both senators in Minnesota. One in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Penn, Jersey, New York, Mass, Rhode Island, and Maine. Now, Maine still has their Smith over there. So, yeah, it's not looking too good for the RDs right now. So I'm going to be very, very careful. Well, maybe not careful. Okay. President Nixon sits at the head of a table, bolt upright, a contemplative look on his face. All along the magnificent mahogany table, the presidential cabinet is seated, from Secretary of Veterans Affairs, far at the end, to Jack Kennedy and H.R. Haldeman, settled next to the president. So far, no one has said a word, aside from a few curt greetings. H.R. Haldeman breaks the palpable silence. I think we all know why we're here. Our friend Guyana has gone too far. We need to do something about it. The Secretary of the Treasury, Robert McNamara, follows Haldeman's lead and speaks next. Nixon's still bearing an angry yet contemplative look. The press doesn't know our involvement in his election. We need threatened constricting economic ties, sanctions, condemnations, and diplomatic isolations. Frankly, Bob, he'll get his trade from somewhere else. Hell, when Germany gets back on its feet, we'll all be in trouble, because that's where we'll get it from. The crowds would jump at the chance for an ally right on their doorstep. Kennedy cuts in, his sharp Massachusetts accent grabbing the attention of the room. Well, what do you suggest? He's our clown in the country. Threats, bribes, and blackmail. McNamara shakes his head. No, he'll just apply pressure for him to repeal the act. If we threaten him, he'll double down on his opposition. Any MPs of theirs he suspects might turn against him will face retribution. We can't top that, if only for moral reasons. Slowly the room evolves into a conflicting arguments. Various cabinet members arguing for an exile army, others for isolation. Slowly a voice cuts through channel. That's enough! Blah! The head of the table has spoken. Richard Nixon stands and then speaks. I don't care about either way. I just want the press and Burnham both to calm the hell down. Force him, pressure him, it doesn't matter. Get the act repealed. He turned to Haldeman, nodding. I'll do it either way. But I want your word, Haldeman. Tell Burnham to repeal the act, or else. Get a bit of a boost of social democracy. See how that ends up going. We no longer get the effects of civilian austerity or military austerity. We're still running a solid deficit, so I'll pay off the debt. And I'll get civilian spending now a little bit more. Situation and prospects in South Africa. Conclusions. A. The South African Federation faces a similar issue to our own of civil rights. Despite never having implemented the so-called apartheid system proposed by the National Party, the continuing legal, social, and economic inequality between black and white South Africans are prime breeding grounds for social unrest, something the already weakened government cannot afford. B. Boer agitation of northwest of South Africa has grown stronger in the past 2 years, especially as the government moves to pass legislation addressing racial inequality. The Boers live relatively isolated from wider South African society and hold proud traditions of political independence and armed defense. An organized uprising is likely in the near future. C. A direct invasion by South Africa's northern neighbors, the African Reichskommissariats, would be very unlikely in the current situation. As they almost entirely rely on their mother nation to provide support, their material and political support to prop up their governments, all the military forces are tied up in internal peacekeeping operations. However, should this support be ever withdrawn, their inaction may turn erratic to the point of losing any sense of predictability. D. The wider American public would not be vehemently opposed to a direct intervention in South Africa should the situation change to require it. Understood. Yeah, so we'll get working on that a bit more, get constructing a bit more. How's the Senate? Does it still look the same? We still have 15 Senator NPP members. A little rough for them, but, you know, how's our campaign Rockies, and where are they campaigning? They're campaigning in New England. I'm thinking next we might even go to the Deep South, try to unearth some of these Democrats, because we don't want to. We're campaigning against a lot of Republicans, and I don't necessarily want to kick all the. Because I've done a few test games already, and I get rid of a lot of Republicans, and the Republicans are actually really willing to work with the C. Oh, today, less than 2 weeks after the initial passing of the National Security Act by the Guinean Parliament, the act has suddenly been repealed under the orders of President Forbes Burnham. The president claims that the act was a temporary measure, and order has been restored such that such dire measures are no longer necessary. This comes as a shocking turn of events to most of the free world, with many experts expecting the strongman Burnham to continue his opposition, eliminating measures. The president has refused further comment, which has left many wondering, Has Burnham had a change of heart? All's well that ends well. Strange that actually worked out, but hey, you know, I'm not going to complain. What do we have left to do? Let's get some more organization done. We have more of our commitment towards African democracy figured out. The triumvirate has collapsed. A solid NPP campaign, beautiful. Let's go ahead and expand our business ties. For truly to defend South Africa from fascist encroachment, we need to make it worth defending. We can encourage American business to invest into South Africa. Not only can we expect support and even financing from them, but we can also expect no more complaints and need no further justification to defend South Africa. No one will be able to complain. Money is upon the line now, after all. There we go. It looks like... yeah, support is pretty even. The RDs run a respectable campaign. We'll keep an eye on them. We'll campaign in the South after this. Upend some Democrats. See how where that ends up taking us. Uh-oh. The Richard Manila envelope on the White House staffer's desk had nothing that struck him as unusual save the absence of a return address. He tore that end open and peeked inside, finding nothing more than a small bundle of papers and photographs. But when he saw what they wore, his blood ran cold. Internal memos from the 1960 Progressive National Convention, transcripts of private conversations between NPP senators, schematics on wiretaps, photos taken inside NPP campaign headquarters, and most chillingly, a letter from Chief of Staff H.R. Haldeman authorizing the espionage. The bottom of the envelope was a note card with a message typed on it. Unless you want this on the front page of the Post next week, contact me and we'll talk. With the address for a P.O. box printed on the other side. The staffer had enough wits about him to immediately reseal the envelope, call the FBI, and pass it on to them. In under an hour, it was on J. Edgar Hoover's desk. A brief call to Nixon informed him that the staffer agreed to stay quiet. The Bureau's top men were already set on tracking the blackmail down. It would be all over in a matter of days. Time to call some plumbers. If the polls are updated, let's see how things are looking. It's a toss-up on the West Coast, a toss-up in Nevada, very interesting. Looks like we're doing very well in the Great Lakes. It's a toss-up in Arizona, which is very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Arkansas is safe. We might be able to push Georgia over the line, though. Then that would be interesting. Vermont is a toss-up. Toss-up for Connecticut. The East Coast is leaning towards it. Safe NPP victory. Likely victory in New York. Very good. We'll probably want to campaign the West Coast after this. If we even need to. We honestly... yeah, I don't know. War in the desert? What a way to treat a former ally. Yeah, Georgia's leaning towards a toss-up. Okay, we got our first doctrine tech done. We'll go ahead and go line artillery. God help us all. The National Security Council has been gathered by the order of the President and recommendation of Treasury Secretary McNamara. Now, Bob, you told me this isn't about Madagascar blockade. It better not be. You just told me there would be no hang-up on the issue. Not at all, Mr. President. McNamara shifted slightly in his seat. The Director of Central Intelligence actually asked me to have you convene this council. He glanced at the director who held a pipe up to his lips. His mouth curled into a glib smile. Get on with it, then, the President urged. With a puff of smoke, he leaned in and began. Let's go ahead and open operations there. There we go. Mr. President, we have contacts high up within the German colonial administration in Madagascar. We have reason to believe that they have some misgivings about their loyalties to Berlin. With the weakening of the German Empire and with Hitler coming at increasingly ill, it's become rather apparent that a conflict may break out on the island sooner rather than later. We have word that rebels are planning to make their move soon. The local government is divided. Nixon shrugged. Who are these contacts? Can we be sure of their sincerity? McNamara pushes glasses further up his nose for dramatic effect. The director puffed again on his pipe. Mr. President, our contact is Reichskommissar Emil Maurice. Nixon seemed stunned for a moment, but collected himself quickly. My God, that's great. And he has a direct line to Hitler? The director nodded. Maurice is one of Hitler's oldest confidants. The relationship has become strained as of late, which is partly why he wants out. And his ward, we think, is good. Nixon nodded in silence for several moments before continuing. Well, damn it, keep me updated on this. If you find any way to breach that bastion, you let me know immediately. Let's see if we can make a dent in the Unity Pact. There we go. Operation Jewel. Let's do... Let's go and add some money. We'll start up Operation Jewel, and then we'll do Operation Charity to help Serbia weaken their garrison. Ooh, okay. Can I get a little extra money for this? Yeah, 60 million. Best of luck to him. Beautiful. We're still working on engraved mirrors. We'll see how those end up treating us. Where's the opposition campaigning right now? The Deep South. Same as us, actually. Interesting. Okay. New national focus set. Let's protect our interests. For the newly realized importance of South Africa, it is essential that we gain a foothold there before anything occurs. Not only will this allow us to react quicker to anything, but that occurs to our lamp democracy of democracy in Africa, but also help justify the intervention to our population. After all, we ought to protect our troops overseas, and you'd be hard-pressed to find an American who disagrees. So we'll get some naval bases, infrastructure, and air bases in Western Cape. And our first material commitment to South Africa will make it easier to convince Americans to intervene, but it'll make it harder for us to pull out if future events require it. So let's see how we do in the South. This is a bit of foreshadowing, so I'll wait until a solid campaign. I'll take it. Henry Jackson, known affectionately to his contemporaries as Scoop, sat at his desk, looking expectantly at the two figures sitting opposite. Maureen Neuberger, Scoop's deputy and fellow senator in the NPP's center wing, quietly thumbed through her notes as she waited for him to speak. Next to her sat the nominal head of the center's more radical wing, Michael Harrington, who waited with the same expectant look at Scoop himself. The two could not be more different, but as the center's leader, Scoop knew he needed both if the party was going to get anywhere. Well, as you all know, our election prospects are still looking dire, began Scoop. The right still holds plenty of influence over the party, and no progressive voter is going to vote for the party whose last candidate was Strom goddamn Thurmond. Worst of all, we still don't even have a candidate. Well, it would help if anyone bothered to put their name forward, joked Harrington with a bareheaded contempt. Perhaps we would do more to support our core working class voters in the Midwest and elsewhere, rather than kowtowing to segregationists and filling our ranks with West Coast elitist types. Neuberger, herself a proud Oregon stock, sat up with an offended look. Hey, everyone here is fighting for the same thing. I've done plenty to speak up for the underprivileged. At least I don't just sit around writing essays about it. Scoop sat still for a moment, smiling bemusedly as his colleagues continued to bicker and snipe at one another. In a way, they were a perfect reflection of Center as a whole. Determined to enact change, but endlessly at its own throat about what change should be. Finally, he coughed, and the other two immediately ceased their childish exchange and looked to him once more. You both are very different, which is exactly why we need to have someone who can speak everyone's language. For to have any hope in this election, we need to move forward with one voice. Harrington and Neuberger looked at each other, unsure of what to say. Scoop glanced out the window with an uncertain look. I don't know who the man to lead us is, but he better show up soon, or we are screwed. Who will speak for the center? I'm thinking we'll want to campaign West Coast next. Yeah, Connecticut's tilting towards the NPP. Vermont's a toss-up. We want to push Alaska and California over the edge. And we have a good chance at doing that. Something from the free state of Magadan. Ooh, there we go. Our mission was successfully accomplished, and the men are returning home safe and sound. This is a rousing victory for CIA, along with American free world. For tracks covered and the world a bit safer, we can rest easy. Preparing for incursion next Fascist menace. Our operatives will be ready for new tasks, and we gain 8 experience. Very nice. The nation of Russia has been a great unknown since the end of the Second World War. Following Barbarossa and the Soviet Union's collapse, the CIA could scarcely glean any information from the vast country. Except for the West Russian War of the 50s, the Russia of our imagination has become a cesspool of violent infighting, with the German bombings preventing any attempts of regional warlords to consolidate power. At least that seems to be the case in West Russian Siberia. For land that stretched from the Baltic Pacific, there are some stretches of territory untouched by the banditry and chaos that plagues the areas adjacent to the Reich. From Central Siberia, the primary recipient of the Bukharin-era Siberian plan, we have heard that a republic has risen and collapsed there between the Second World War and the West Russian War. Then there is the Russian Far East, a region that the CIA has been observing for quite some time. In brief, the legitimate government of the Soviet Union, under the provisional leadership of Yenrik Yagoda, retreated there after their defeat. Subsequently, the anti-Bolshevik pack sprang out from Manchuria and Harbin, making significant gains before shattering into 3 parts based on Chita, Magadan, and Amur. In particular interest of this briefing is the Free State of Magadan, led by Mikhail Makovsky, a local fascist of some repute. He and his foreign minister, Nikolai Petlin, have promised reforms and democracy should the U.S. support their bid for the, as Makovsky insisted, Great Crusade for Russia, as well as intelligence information. The agency notes that the decision is the president's alone to make. However, it cautions the president in supporting any fascist bid for Russia. Moreover, the aforementioned minister, Petlin, seems to be a more malleable candidate for leadership. Whatever the president decides, the agency shall carry it out. Lend him our tentative support in exchange for reforms. We could use this intel. Okay, I'll take a second. The RD campaign crashes and burns. There we go. I'll wait until we get our new campaign going before I read that. Which I think I agreed West Coast. There we go, West Coast. The task of apprehending the unknown White House blackmail was hardly difficult. The P.O. box had been registered under a false name and paid for in cash, so the FBI decided to play along and write a letter agreeing to the blackmail's demands and asked to meet in person. Surprisingly, the blackmailer showed up, suspecting nothing, and was immediately nabbed by federal agents. The blackmailer turned out to be a 24-year-old NPP activist, a Charles B. Juneau, but they have had little success getting more than that out of him. He's refused to say anything besides requests for a lawyer, but fingerprint evidence has left no doubt to him being the one who sent the envelope. The Bureau's best guess is that he's a misguided progressive who wanted to force change with some underhanded tactics. But that's all they've got to go on. Charges of espionage and mail fraud are already working their way through the pipeline, and he'll hopefully go to trial by November. With any luck and a bit of nudging from White House, it could get moved up to October or late September, meaning that he'll be safely behind bars when the midterm elections roll around. Well, 3 cheers to Hoover and his boys. And we'll wait and see how the polls end up updating. We'll get some guys with old Chrissy over there. You seem to get a promotion for Taylor. What do we want to get? We can get Guerrilla Fighter. I'll take that, actually. That's not the worst. I think we can get something for Leonard, too. Extra Marine Supply Grace. And what are these guys? Let's get all these guys in Miami. For whatever reason, polls are updated. Let's take a gander. Wisconsin is a toss-up. We might want to go to Great Lakes after this. Oh, fuck. This is very, very tough to decide. The Rockies are tilting towards an RD victory. We'll get pickups in New York, Pennsylvania. We might want... The S&P holds on to Scotland. Makes sense. Where are these guys campaigning? Great Plains. They're kind of wasting their time over there, I think. Despite the jubilation about catching the blackmail, the mood in the White House and Department of Justice building quickly turned sour when an unpleasant piece of information came forward. Juno wasn't acting alone. There was no way that the envelope could have been screened and intercepted with the other incoming mail unless the Cohen conspirator on the inside had been helped get it through. The Secret Service immediately been investigating potential leads in the mailroom, but to little success so far. The White House staff are all whispering about something that's going on, and most of them suspect that information breach involves the NPP in some way. Even worse are the rumors about another grayscales on the horizon, but directed at any and all NPP members. Though this is currently limited to the White House, and there are certainly very few professional NPP members in the Nixon administration, or few professed NPP members in the Nixon administration, it would lead to widespread panic if news leaked out to the rest of the executive branch. It's just bureaucracy, let alone the press. This is getting complicated. Shit. We'll get working on some special forces modifiers, actually. It's going to be a very good thing to get. We're protecting our interests. Next, let's work on South Africa secured. Actually, we want to work on that? Let's work on something else. Let's work on smashing the crested wave. When he wrestled a giant's prize cattle for his 10th labor, Hercules journeyed farther westwards than the borders his map detail. Before returning to Mycenae, he erected 2 mountain-sized pillars where the neighboring coast met Poseidon's boundless blue dominion. Inscribed upon these pillars, demarking the world-seeming edge, was world ne plus ultra, no further beyond. The erudite can draw parallels between the Japanese Empire's conquest and the Greek hero's 10th labor. Like Hercules, its armies and fleets ventured towards the continent's westernmost edge to wrest wealth and glory from Europe's giants. Like Hercules, they halted at a body of water, in this case for Ganges, and ventured no further. But unlike Hercules, they feasted merrily on their spoils for years hence. Now, even grasping its empire's edges, the game has become a Herculean task, for Tokyo's corpulent digits. In effect, India and Southeast Asia have turned into cracks running along an otherwise perfect spear's surface, and with a little help from Washington, these cracks are widening into gorges, tearing Japan's pet projects apart. Well, there we go. Pandit Nehru will go to Washington. I think what I might do, I might end up saving real quick before this, and reload so we get a stellar campaign. It's a little cheesy, I admit. I'll save now. Yeah. And then a solid campaign. That should hopefully be good enough. Okay, we got a solid campaign. Hopefully that'll be enough. I think we'll go Great Lakes next. Great Plains, how are they doing? Respectable. It's a Great Plains. I'm not too worried about them. Man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is a war against himself. These were a few of the chilling words marine biologist Rachel Carson used to decry America's ignorant addiction to pesticides in a newly released book, Silent Spring. A product of nearly 4 years of original research into government-funded eradication campaigns, the 400-page publication asserts that the chemicals used for pest removal, DDT, aminoriazole, 4D, harm far more than the vermin they were made to exterminate. They instead seep deep into the soils and render impotent, she claims, and linger in the fruits and crops Americans eat. In response to the accusations, DuPont and Vesicle Chemicals have filed libel suits against the researchers. Their efforts to preserve a standing have thus far, however, been stymied by both the court of law and the court of public opinion. The book itself is shot up in first place in the New York Times bestsellers for nonfiction, a sign of the American people's approval of a whistleblower increasingly compared to Upton Sinclair. Leading scientists now remark that the nationwide ban on synthetic poisons in America's laboratories peddle is now only a matter of when. Well, for the future. And I'm going to cut it here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you as always for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you want to see more of this content, you should go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more uploads every weekday, as well as every Saturday. If you have any comments, feedback, concerns, anything of the sort, go and leave the comment section below. I read all the comments I get and appreciate any all feedback you kind of folks might have for me. If you want to see $3 bucks, I have a Patreon down below. If you want to chat or play games, I have a Discord. And you want to see me do this sort of stuff live, I have a Twitch. All of those links are down in the description box below. Thank you as always for watching, ladies and gentlemen. My name has been DB333, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.